Hello and welcome. It's described as the gravest threat to our planet, so why aren't we doing more to deal with the impact of climate change? The world is experiencing its hottest year since record-keeping began in 1880. Russia's facing its worst drought in 130 years and has declared a state of emergency in many regions where the heat wave ignited forest fires and destroyed crops. Experts say the deadly floods in Pakistan, landslides in China, and the breakup of a huge chunk of ice in Greenland prove that global warming is a reality that cannot be ignored or denied any longer. So today we ask what can be done to spur collective global action on climate change. Remember, you can call in with your questions and comments, and we also welcome your SMS and emails on the show. Well, joining us now from Cape Town in South Africa is swimmer and environmentalist activist Lewis Pugh. He loves to swim, not necessarily in a pool like you or me, but in hostile conditions such as the icy waters of the North Pole and freezing Himalayan lakes. He says he does it to highlight the damage to our environment from the rising temperatures caused by global warming. Lewis, great to have you on the show. And we're just going to kick off and mention, of course, you are a dedicated environmentalist. I'm wondering what you make of the current slew of what seem to be like natural disasters that are occurring. We've got the ravaging floods in Pakistan, which everyone's been following on the news. Those fires in Russia, I mentioned, with toxic smog that it's creating. There's the landslides in China and that huge chunk of ice breaking off in Greenland. What do you make of that when you hear about all these things happening pretty much all at the same time?
Yeah, I think they're just the warning signs of things to come, to be honest, Riz.
In the sense that, when you're keeping an eye on it, it seems very odd in such far-flung places across the planet. Scientists are reluctant largely to link it to global warming to some degree, but presumably you may see it as sort of undeniable evidence that we are facing something serious.
Riz, wherever I go in the world, I'm seeing evidence of climate change, whether it be in the Arctic, whether it be in the Himalayas, whether it be in the Indian Ocean under the water. Wherever I go, I'm seeing evidence of climate change, and this is what the scientists have been predicting for some time. And it's tragic to see the floods in Pakistan and places like that, but the warning signs have been there for some time.
You know what baffles me sometimes is the skepticism, the degree of skepticism that still exists among a lot of people. I'm going to put an email to you that we got from Mauritania from a viewer by the name of Yuba, who says, global warming is a myth that has been created by the West. And when you're advocating, obviously, for a more action, how do you deal with people who obviously seem to be so skeptical about what's going on?
Riz, I'm not sure that there are many skeptics out there. I think there are a lot of climate change deniers. I don't even call some of the people skeptics. They just simply don't believe it. They will never believe it. There are some people who don't even believe that Elvis Presley is dead. I put them into the same category. When you go around the world and you see what is happening in the Himalayas, when you see the melting which is happening in the Arctic and down in Antarctica, and you see all the evidence which the scientists are putting in front of us, it's very, very hard to deny that climate change is happening and that in the main it is being caused by man.
I'm going to get on to some of the amazing expeditions and achievements that you've managed across the years in your advocacy, but let me get another email to you that came into our Facebook page from Jeanette Mallet, who wrote in saying, we're falling behind in our efforts to fight climate change because we don't want to make the tough decisions necessary to make a difference. Now, of course, we've got the hottest summer in many places around the world. It's really quite stifling in DC, for example. To what degree do you think this really is a wake-up call for people, or are they just going to forget it once it cools down again?
Well, the unfortunate thing is, we had such a huge reaction just before Copenhagen last year, and then afterwards, when the negotiations really didn't come to much, the public interest in climate change has fallen off quite considerably. I hope that as we move into the climate change negotiations at the end of this year in Mexico, that the public will really get behind these negotiations. We really do need a fair deal, a bold deal. We stand at a crucial moment in the history of this world, Riz, where if we don't make the right decisions now, our children and our grandchildren simply won't live in a world which is safe and secure, and most of all sustainable.
Now, it's interesting you say that, because of course people get easily distracted. An email that we had in from Pakistan touches on this, from Hera Shams Khan, who wrote in saying, The crisis is that our priorities have shifted from climate change to issues such as the global recession. To what degree, do you think that there is a danger that as people focus on economics, they suddenly start to forget about the dangers that we're facing on a day-to-day basis, for the environment?
Yes, I think that listener is 100% right. I go around the world, I meet many heads of state and many world leaders, and at the moment they are preoccupied with trying to get the economy back on track. The environment always seems to be the least important of issues. I frankly can't think of anything more important than ensuring, as I just said, that our children inherit a world which is safe and secure and most of all sustainable. It baffles me why world leaders don't put that at the very top of their agenda.
Now, interestingly enough, you've seen more of this world, and certainly more remote parts than the majority of people would ever get a chance to see. And you have some remarkable expeditions and achievements. Let's look at some of those. Now, you swam across the North Pole and across the glacial lake under the summit of Mount Everest. That was in May this year. But how much are you finding that those expeditions that you're taking on and the things you're doing are genuinely translating into greater public awareness? What kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, these swims, so the one which I did in 2007, I swam across the North Pole, and what I was trying to do by that swim was I was doing a swim in a place which has been frozen over for millennia. It shouldn't be possible to do a swim across the North Pole, and afterwards the swim gave me so much media attention that I was able to go around to world leaders and business leaders and really share my message about taking the right decisions today to ensure that we have a future tomorrow, and ensuring that we prioritize the environment right at the top of the agenda.
It's interesting, as you were talking there as well, our viewers could see a frame on the TV at the same time of you getting into the water there on the ice sheets, and having thoughts about getting into a cold swimming pool. I can't even imagine what it would be like to try to get into that. And you've been nicknamed the Ice Bear, and I gather that you're able to swim in these remarkably icy waters because of your body's capable of something called anticipatory thermogenesis. Give us a sort of basic explanation of what that is.
Yes, that's quite a mouthful. Anticipatory meaning before the event, thermo, heat, and genesis, creation. So before I get into the water, we've noticed that my core body temperature rises in anticipation of getting into the water, in anticipation of the cold. It's not something which happens consciously, it happens subconsciously, and we think that it's as a result of years and years of swimming in cold water in and around Cape Town.
Now, I presume that, well, at least from what I was reading about the swims you've done, the average person would probably die in a matter of a couple of minutes in those kind of conditions. Is that correct?
Well, just to put in perspective, if you go and swim in a normal indoor swimming pool, the water temperature will be 27 degrees centigrade. If you swim across the English Channel, it'll be 18. The passengers who fell off the Titanic fell into water of 5 degrees centigrade. The water at the North Pole is actually below zero because it's salt water. It's minus 1.7 degrees centigrade or 29 degrees Fahrenheit. It's very cold, and a normal person would certainly die within a short period of time in that water.
Can you remember, I was wondering what prompted you to try, something that is potentially so dangerous, but can you remember that first dip into those icy waters and what your fears and expectations were at the time?
Riz, I will never ever forget standing on the sea ice at the North Pole about to dive in and thinking to myself, I'd never seen anything which looked so frightening in my life. The water's completely black, and thinking to myself, if things go pear-shaped now and I don't make this swim, how long would it take for my frozen body to sink the 4.5 kilometers to the bottom of the ocean? It's a very, very frightening thing to swim across the North Pole. And I didn't do it as a stunt. I did it as a symbolic swim to really try and shake the lapels of world leaders to really get them to think, okay, if there's somebody swimming at the North Pole, this has been a place which has been frozen over for millennia, we now need to take steps.
I'll get on to more of that in a moment, Lewis. Let me just get a caller in here. We've got one from Virginia in the USA. Oliver, thanks for being with us. What would you like to ask?
Thanks, Riz. My question to your guest is, this gentleman, he goes and swim in the cold water and the ice water. Is he bringing publicity itself or publicity to the climate change issue? Because the climate change issue is very obvious. Everybody can recognize it through the changes in the climate.
Right.
And lately we are seeing a lot of people doing this, like the lady from United Arab Emirates. She went to the North Pole and she dumped some sand over there.
Right.
So I mean, everybody's doing this. Is this for publicity or what it is?
I was going to say, Oliver, I think it's quite a different thing from what Ilham Al-Qasimi did. That was a remarkable trip up to the North Pole that she made. But Oliver had answered that just a moment ago, saying that he didn't do it as a stunt. He did it specifically to shake the lapels of those in power that might be able to make change. And following up on that question from Oliver, Lewis, let me ask you, what reaction have you had from politicians? What kind of impact have you made on those who might be able to make major decisions?
Riz, world leaders have been treating climate change. We have some people who are optimistic realists, we have some people who are pessimists, and we have some people who are cynical people. I'm trying to try and pull as many people across from the cynical and from the pessimistic, because we just can't have that type of response to climate change, and trying to pull them as much as possible towards being optimistic realists and trying to get behind bold measures to try and put a cut to the problems which we're seeing at the moment. I've had some success. There are some people who credit me for persuading Prime Minister Gordon Brown to appoint a dedicated climate change minister 2 years ago. I've had some success with some businesses with making cuts themselves, but it's a long road, and we're only beginning to climb this mountain.
We're going to take a short break now. When we return, more on some of the advocacy that Lewis Pugh is doing and some of his adventures in the frozen waters, which he likes to swim. We'll be right back. Welcome back. 2010 so far has been a year of rising temperatures, forest fires, mudslides and floods, and experts are saying these are unmistakable signs that climate change is having a bigger impact than we thought and sooner than we imagined. What options do we have? Well, discussing that with me is cold water swimmer and environmental activist Lewis Pugh. He is the only man to have swum long distance in all 5 oceans of the world in order to draw attention to the environmental plight of our planet. Now, Lewis, just before the break, we were talking about the impact on some politicians and perhaps, kind of how they might move forward with decisions. We had one email that came in from Saudi Arabia, if I could put it to you. Sayed Zaki Ahmed wrote in saying, the developed countries emit the most greenhouse gases. Why should developing countries suffer? That's something that often comes up. People say, why should everyone have to make the same decisions? The developed world has managed to move forward, but the developing world is now being asked to make major sacrifices and perhaps stunt its growth. How do you answer that when you hear that?
Yes, it seems very, very unfair. But the reality of it is that unless we all make cuts, we're simply not going to make it down the road. It really is that simple. Last year, myself and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, we took some hearings here in South Africa where people most affected by climate change. We listened to farmers and fishermen from across the continent describe the impact of climate change on them. And it's heartbreaking, it really is. But every single person across the globe is going to have to take a radical tactical shift in the way we deal with the environment if we're going to see ourselves right to the end of this road.
Well, let's look a little more at the tactics that you're using, and that is being, out there in the public eye, doing these incredible swims. And I gather the swim you did in the Himalayas just recently, you actually managed to witness you could witness the melting ice there, the glaciers. You could see it for yourself happening firsthand. And apparently that was a particularly dangerous swim for you. It came very close to a life and death situation, I gather.
Yes, I mean, there's some people who deny that the glaciers in the Himalayas are melting. It's laughable. I walked up the Khumbu Glacier on the west side of Mount Everest. All the way along the glacier, you could see big pools of melting ice water. The swim was extremely dangerous. The water there is about 2 degrees centigrade, but it's right up in the heavens. It's 5,300 meters above sea level. It's very, very difficult to breathe, and on a number of occasions I thought I wasn't actually going to make it during that swim. But the swim had a reason, and the reason is to try and link in the public's mind between protecting the environment and climate change. Unless we're able unless the public understand that there is a link between conflict and not protecting the environment, I think then we have problems.
Okay, we've got a caller on the line from Iran. It's good to hear from Iran. Go ahead, Said. What would you like to ask?
Hi, Riz. How are you?
Good,
My
thank
question is for your guest, Mr. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
He is doing a great job in creating awareness around the world on the environment issue, and it is indeed definitely a very important issue. And we really was hearing of his story, and I was really impressed. My question to him is not about the environment directly, but I would like to ask him about the flood victims in Pakistan, whose number has grown to 20 million people today, displaced, without homes, without shelter, without food. And there is a very slow response from around the world, starting from USA to South Africa. And I would like to ask Louis if he could, as he is on the TV, the whole world knows him, can he issue an appeal to the world?
All right, Said, let me ask that. It's what Lewis, what Said is referring to in particular is what's happened in Pakistan and the scale of it. Of course, we're seeing that and a number of other things like the landslides in China. To what degree are you asked to be more active, to get involved more visibly with dealing with, say, particular incidents, particular disasters?
Yes, it's very frequent. You know, I'm based in South Africa, but I go around the world, and it's often to talk about environmental issues further afield in South Africa. And I often get a lot of flack in South Africa where people say, well, you know, why aren't you doing stuff back here in South Africa? We've got enough environmental problems here on our own doorstep without you having to deal with the Arctic or the Himalayas. My response to that is to say that we now live in a global environment, that what happens in the Himalayas or what happens in the Arctic would directly affect everybody, be you in Pakistan, be you in South Africa, or be you in Zimbabwe. And you know, what we're seeing in the Himalayas is going to affect everybody around the world. I do really feel that there's a risk of instability in that region because of climate change. You know, the nearly 2 billion people, so 1 in 3 people on this earth rely on the water from the Himalayas. And with the increasing population and the decreasing amount of water in the Himalayas because of climate change, I think that's it's a recipe for disaster down the road.
Canada on the line here. We've got Late on the line. Go ahead, please.
Hi, sir. How are you?
Hi, good, thanks. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I just have a question. Is climate change solely the effect of human pollution and companies, or is it natural? Is it that the sun heats up the earth?
Now, of course, I see what you're saying, Late. I mean, of course, Lewis, you're not a scientist as such, and I know you advocate from a sort of perspective of just having witnessed a lot of this. And I wonder to what degree you see when you travel the impact of man on the environment, not just you know what might be sort of indirect, like the rising temperatures and so on, but do you get to see the kind of pollution people talk about, the North Pole being polluted, for example?
Yes, it's tragic to see it. There's an island about 1,000 kilometers away from the North Pole, so one of the most remote places on this whole earth. And when you walk along the beaches there, you will see pollution all over the beaches, big plastic, tires, you name it. And that's simply come across the Gulf Stream from America, from Britain, from Northern Ireland, those type of places. Wherever you are on this earth, even in the most remote places, you see the footprint of man.
It's interesting, you know, we did a show on the issue of the giant garbage patch, the Pacific garbage patch, where there's a lot of, you know, pollution in the vortices that occur in the oceans. You as a swimmer, I guess, must be particularly sensitive to what's happening to the oceans themselves, because, of course, you're in them a lot of the time.
In 2007, Riz, I did a swim across the Maldives. And I'll never ever forget swimming across those islands, because they are some of the most beautiful islands in the world, and swimming across reefs. And below me, it was like swimming in the Garden of Eden. You could see great big manta rays, sharks, turtles. It was absolutely magical. And then I swam across some reefs which have been badly affected by climate change. The reefs have died, and the fish have disappeared. And it's like swimming across a lunar landscape. Just because the temperature has risen just a little bit, all the sea life just disappears.
What do you make of that giant sort of 100-mile ice island breaking off Greenland, off the northwest of Greenland, which has a potentially disastrous consequence if it floats down, I guess?
Riz, for the past 7 years, every single summer I've been to the Arctic, and every summer I've seen less and less sea ice, and then the ice which is on land, so glacial ice moving down the land into the sea. I see every single year more and more big chunks coming into the sea and glaciers moving up mountain. It doesn't surprise me. Certainly it'll have an impact on shipping in the North Atlantic as it moves down into the North Atlantic.
Lewis, when you see this kind of stuff firsthand, you described the reefs there, and you're swimming out in the oceans, you're seeing the melting ice, you're seeing, I mean, literally firsthand everything. What keeps you optimistic that we can do something that will be realistic in changing that situation?
We cannot afford not to be optimistic. We cannot afford to be pessimistic or cynical. The battle is too serious for us to have that type of mindset. The most important thing for us now is in fact our mindset. When I go around and I meet various heads of state and you look them direct in the eye, and you wonder whether, you know, behind they really truly believe that they can stop climate change. And it's only unless we believe in ourselves and believe in our capacity to be able to change can we ever stop climate change.
Well, Lewis Pugh, I want to thank you and congratulate you on your remarkable achievements. Thanks for bringing this obviously to public attention. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
And remember, you can follow the show on Facebook and see what we're up to there. You can give us feedback on the show topics and pose your questions and comments. On the next show, the South Asian divide. As India and Pakistan prepare to celebrate their independence from Britain, we look back at the history of these two nations and ask, was the partition of the subcontinent really a good idea? Controversial. We want your views. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.